Welcome to this series about who's who in the Nativity story, where we're taking a look at the notable characters involved in the birth of Jesus. Now, today we're going to talk about somebody very special, and that is Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary came from a very small town in Israel called Nazareth. Nazareth probably had a population of about 500 people, and it was off the beaten track, meaning that it was not probably a mixed group of people. It was probably predominantly Jewish people living in this small town. And like any small town, the focus was on community. Mary lived with her parents, and her role was to be a support for everything domestic. Mary would have learned how to cook, how to bake bread, how to tend to the family farm and also the family vegetables, etc. And she would spend most of her days actually working with her mother on meal preparation, securing all the meals that needed to be made, as well as getting water, and taking care of the house while her father would be out working. Mary also did not go to school. This is not something that the women did. Only the men went to school, and that was a religious school where they would learn the Torah. They'd start at age 5, and by 13, they were done with their religious education. So we could see that Mary had a peaceful life that was filled with family, faith, with the local community, in a small town where everybody knew everybody else. Very nice upbringing for Mary. Now, Jewish women at that day, in that time, they were in an arranged marriage. They had to participate in an arranged marriage that was done by the parents. And in this case, we see that Mary's parents arranged for her to marry Joseph. And the parents would get together and they would discuss the marriage arrangement and who was going to get paid what in terms of a dowry. And this would have happened when Mary was very young, like 14, 15 years old, pretty young by today's standards. Could you imagine such a thing? But back in those days, that's how it was done. And the parents pretty much picked your spouse, and this is what you would have to go along with. So Mary and Joseph now are engaged, and the engagement period was like a year before you actually got betrothed or married. And during that time, Mary would continue to live in her family home, and Joseph would live in his family home. And of course, there was no fooling around going on between them, for sure. That was not something that happened back then. So they're betrothed. Now, Mary is waiting for this engagement to end up in a marriage, but guess what happens? Something super unexpected, kind of shocking to her, and that is she gets a visit from a celestial being, Gabriel. Gabriel comes to Mary and says to her, "Greetings, Mary. You have found great favor in the eyes of God, and you are going to bear the Son of God, who is Jesus, and he will be a blessing to all mankind. He is great in the sight of God." And Mary's taking all this in, which would have been, like, what? What's going on? I'm not married, and you're telling me I'm going to bear the Son of God? I just can't imagine how you would actually process all that in the moment as Gabriel is telling you that. But I love this about Mary because she doesn't question it or wonder if this is true. The thing she asked about is, how's that going to happen? Like, how will it the mechanics of how do you get pregnant when you're a virgin? That's what she's interested in. And Gabriel delivers to her the message of how it will happen, that it will come from the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the agent of the pregnancy, and that she will then have a son whose name is Joseph. She says to Gabriel, let it be as you have said. She's so humble. She's so sweet. She's so obedient. She's, I don't know, I don't want to say she's naive, but she's youthful. So she says, if this is what God's plan is for me, then let it be. Now, to help her understand what's going on, Gabriel says, by the way, Mary, your relative Elizabeth is pregnant. And, that's information that you should probably know about. And so Mary takes this information and she goes immediately to go see Elizabeth. Why did she do that? Well, I think it's probably in order to get confirmation in a way of what Gabriel said, that if I go see my relative Elizabeth, who lives in a different town, and she's pregnant, I'll know that this is all true. And so she goes to see Elizabeth. And at this meeting between Mary and Elizabeth, we have this wonderful, joyful moment when Elizabeth sees Mary and says, oh my gosh, you are favored among women. You're bearing the Son of God. And Mary certainly sees that Elizabeth is pregnant. She's like 6 months along at this point. And they hug, and the child in Elizabeth's womb, who is John the Baptist, leaps for joy. And her womb is filled with the Holy Spirit, meaning that John was filled with the Holy Spirit even before he was born. So I love that story about Mary and Elizabeth. Now, as Mary's pregnancy progresses, she's now married to Joseph, and the family ends up going from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and that is where she has her child, Jesus. It really is an amazing story of faith and obedience and humility. I love that Mary is kind of chill with it all. I know she doesn't have all the answers. Like, I'm certain she's in shock about it. And how do you tell your parents? And how do you tell your friends? And what are they going to say? But she seems to be pretty much living in the reality that this is from God, and that God is going to help her through it every step of the way. And it's not just God, it's also Joseph, her life partner, who is there for her, who cares very much for her, who protects Mary and their child. So it's this kind of cool little family story of something that happens to an ordinary person, and it becomes an extraordinary thing in her life. And her willingness to go through that journey, her ability to be obedient through all the ups and downs, really sets Mary apart. And I love Mary. I'm grateful for everything that she did. And that's the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus.